Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about my week number 13 defenses to stream for fantasy football in 2021. Inside today's video, I'm going to be going in depth into 5 different defenses that I believe you guys should be looking to pick up off the waiver wire right now based upon their matchups for week number 13. But before we could get into the breakdown of the defenses for this week, I would like to ask, if you are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, to please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below, because not only is it free, I put out content every single day to help you guys win your 2021 Fantasy Football Championship. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure to hit that like button down below to help boost this video up the algorithm so that more beautiful people like yourself can see today's video. I'd also like to ask, if you guys are on Twitter and would like to follow me on there, to please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. The link to my Twitter is also down below in the video description. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 13 defenses to stream. Of note, there are 4 teams on bye this week. We got the Carolina Panthers, the Cleveland Browns, the Green Bay Packers, as well as the Tennessee Titans. So my first defense to be streaming on the week, my number 1 ranked defense to be picking up off the waiver wire right now, is the Miami Dolphins going up against the New York Football Giants this week. The Miami Dolphins defense is being rostered in 44.8% of leagues on NFL.com. So if you play on CBS, ESPN, Yahoo, any of those other fantasy football platforms, then the roster percentage is going to be slightly different. So the Miami Dolphins last week go up against the Carolina Panthers at home in Miami, and they absolutely mopped the fucking floor with Cam Newton. A couple of weeks ago, Cam Newton got into the game for his first start of the year for the Carolina Panthers, or it wasn't even technically his first start because he came in a couple of times for PJ Walker, and after scoring that touchdown, he asserted that he's back. He screamed, "I'm back!" And it was so cool to see Cam Newton back in Carolina. But you know what's even funnier, Cam? Now you're back on the fucking bench because the Miami Dolphins defense wiped the floor with you. The Miami Dolphins defense was amazing in this game up against the Carolina Panthers. They had 5 sacks. Not 1, not 2, but 3 interceptions in that game. 1 touchdown and just 10 points allowed up against the Carolina Panthers. Like I said, the Dolphins defense was so good in this game that Cam Newton got benched. The only points they scored were early on in the game. That touchdown they scored was like their first drive on offense. And I was thinking as a Dolphins fan that, oh, this is going to be a very interesting game. The Vegas lines made it seem like the Dolphins were an underdog, getting 2 or 3 points, depending on what book you were looking at. And instead, the Miami Dolphins just ran train on the Carolina Panthers. And I think it is entirely possible, with how good this defense has looked over this winning streak, starting with the Houston Texans, I would not be surprised at all if the Dolphins defense looked amazing yet again up against the New York Football Giants. And that is why I have them ranked as my number 1 defense to be streaming on the week. In week number 12, the Eagles defense went up against the Giants in MetLife, so that was an away game for the Philadelphia Eagles. They got 1 sack in that game, as well as 13 points allowed. The Philadelphia Eagles probably should have won that game about 50 times. Apparently, Jalen Reagor needs lessons on how to catch a football, but hey, the Eagles defense did look good in that game, so I do believe that it is definitely possible that the Miami Dolphins defense is able to completely shut down Daniel Jones and make him make all of those dumb decisions that you know are just inside of Daniel Jones. Those plays that make you scratch your head, those kind of plays that make absolutely no sense. Now, some people call him Danny Dimes, other people call him Danny Fumbles, Danny Interceptions, because the guy is just so prone to turnovers. And with the Dolphins defense being so prone as of recently to getting turnovers, to turning the ball over from the opposing offense, I believe that the Dolphins defense is going to look amazing in this performance up against the Giants. Next defense to be streaming here is the Minnesota Vikings going up against the Detroit Lions in Detroit. The Vikings defense is being rostered in 8% of leagues again on NFL.com. So if you do play on different websites, the roster percentage will be slightly different. Last week, the Minnesota Vikings went up against the San Francisco 49ers in San Francisco, and the defense looked pretty solid in that game, getting 2 sacks, 1 INT, and 34 points allowed. Kirk Cousins inevitably chokes the game at the end of the game, but that's just typical Minnesota Vikings fashion. But this week, going up against the 49ers is a lot different than going up against the Detroit Lions. The Lions haven't even won a single game on the season. They should have won on Thanksgiving up against the Chicago Bears, but the coaching there, I like Dan Campbell and all, but there was just so many mistakes in that game that the Lions could have easily won, and that Bears defense is not the Bears defense of the past, and that Bears team didn't even really show up to play, and the Vikings have had a nice stretch of games as of recently. They beat the Packers 2 weeks ago. I understand, obviously, they ended up losing to the 49ers, but there's a big difference, like I said, between the 49ers and the Detroit Lions, and I think that the Minnesota Vikings, who came out to play and looked pretty solid up against the Niners, just imagine what they're going to do up against the garbage-ass Detroit Lions offense. The Bears defense, again, not the Bears defense of the last couple of years, went up against the Lions on Thanksgiving in Detroit. Like I said, they had 1 sack, 1 fumble recovery, and 14 points allowed. To me, it's kind of a no-brainer when you are addressing streaming a defense up against the Detroit Lions, because it's so obvious. You're just streaming any defense. I don't care how bad the defense is. You're going to play them up against the Lions because the Lions offense simply cannot get it done. DeAndre Swift seems like he may be missing this game, maybe out for a couple of weeks, so that gives me even more confidence in streaming the Minnesota Vikings defense, so I do love them in this game up against the Detroit Lions. Next defense to stream is the Philadelphia Eagles going up against the New York Jumbo Jets in this game in New York. The Eagles defense is currently being rostered in 28.3% of leagues. Now, the Jets had an upset win up against the Houston Texans. Now, is it necessarily an upset when two garbage-ass teams are going toe-to-toe with each other? Not necessarily, but according to the Vegas lines, technically, that is an upset. But if there was one big takeaway from that game, it is that Zach Wilson is not on the same level of Cool Joe Flacco, of Magic Mike White, of Josh Johnson. To me, Zach Wilson did not look very good at all in that game. Now, is the offensive line doing him any favors by letting him get bent over behind there and just absolutely butt-fucked every single play? He virtually has to throw the ball in like half of a second. Of course, that's not helping him at all as a young quarterback. Does that mean that I think Zach Wilson is a bust? Of course not, but I do believe that streaming a defense up against Zach Wilson is quite advantageous. We have talked about the Philadelphia Eagles defense already when they went up against the Giants, so I will just reiterate those stats. 1 sack, 13 points allowed in that game up against the Giants. Week number 12, even though the Texans lost that game up against the Jumbo Jets, they still had 4 sacks, 1 INT, and 21 points allowed, and in my opinion, the Philadelphia Eagles defense is much better than the Texans defense, so I do believe that this is an optimal matchup to be streaming here. The Philadelphia Eagles going up against the Jumbo Jets. But before we get into the 4th defense to be streaming on the week, I would like to ask that if you have ended up enjoying thus far, to please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. Again, not only is it free, I put out content every single day to help you guys win your 2021 Fantasy Football Championship. I'd also like to ask if you could please hit that like button down below. It would help me out a ton. I would greatly appreciate it. I hope you guys have ended up enjoying thus far through the video. So the first 3 defenses I really like, and then defense number 4, it's a little bit more up in the air, and then defense number 5, it is definitely up in the air, but I do like all 5 of these defenses, especially if you are in a pickle with defenses number 4 and 5. So at number 4, we got the Kansas City Chiefs defense going up against the Denver Broncos. The Kansas City Chiefs defense is currently being rostered in 27.8% of leagues. So the Chiefs were on bye in week number 12, so we got to go ahead and look towards week number 11 for the defensive stats. In that game, they went up against the Dallas Cowboys in a game that everyone basically got down on their knees and gave the gawk to, that this is going to be such a high-scoring game, a back-and-forth, tit-for-tat game between Dak Prescott and Patrick Mahomes, and it was the exact fucking opposite of that. It was a snooze fest. But at the end of the day, we still did see the Chiefs defense play quite well up against a great offense in the Dallas Cowboys. 5 sacks, 2 INTs, 1 fumble recovery, and 9 points allowed in that game to the Dallas Cowboys offense. But Nick, Amari Cooper wasn't there. Does that mean that we shouldn't count that for the Cowboys? Of course, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't count it. You still got to count it. The Chiefs defense has looked pretty solid over the last couple of games. The Chiefs defense is on a 6-game streak right now of getting an interception, so it is very likely that they could turn over Teddy Two Gloves, Teddy Bridgewater in this matchup. In week number 12, the Chargers went up against the Denver Broncos, and things didn't go too swimmingly for their defense. 1 sack, 1 INT, and 22 points allowed. The Chargers defense just got beat down by Teddy Two Gloves and friends of the Denver Broncos. Teddy Bridgewater got hurt in that game. Drew Lock entered, but Teddy Bridgewater closed out the game. Obviously, if the Chiefs were going up against horsecock Drew Lock, then I'd probably be a little bit more confident in their defense, because Drew Lock just makes so many stupid fucking mistakes. He's kind of like Daniel Jones, where there's going to be those games where Daniel Jones catches fire and he plays amazing. Same thing with Drew Lock. Drew Lock is a very momentum-based quarterback where if he starts cooking things up early on in the game, then he's probably going to have a great performance, but if he falters early on, then he's probably just going to continue to play like absolute shit, but the Chiefs are not going to be going up against Drew Lock, as it seems like Teddy Bridgewater should be just fine. I think the Kansas City Chiefs may not end up winning this game, but I do think that the defense will look good up against the Broncos. Final defense to be discussing in today's video is the Cincinnati Bengals going up against the LA Chargers. The Bengals defense is currently being rostered in 7% of leagues. The matchup between the two good quarterbacks, quote unquote, the two great quarterbacks, quote unquote, from last year's draft. Obviously, Joe Burrow, the number 1 overall pick, and Justin Herbert, the pervert, the number 6 overall pick. Justin Herbert, the number 6 overall pick himself, didn't look great last week. Did not look very good, and we will discuss that when it comes to discussing the defense versus the LA Chargers. So last week, the Cincinnati Bengals went up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and this was not really even a beatdown. It was a whole nother level of a beatdown. This was a fucking clowning, a absolute shellacking, a dumping on of the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Bengals defense, 3 sacks, not 1, but 2 INTs, 1 fumble recovery, 1 tug. They scored a touchdown in that game, and 10 points allowed. The Bengals just steamrolled the Steelers on all phases of the game. This was a complete and utter domination, 50 Shades of Grey style. So the Bengals defense looked great, but that was up against Big Ben, who didn't look good at all. So maybe Justin Herbert, the pervert, is able to wake up in this game, and that is why I have them ranked as the 5th best defense to be streaming, because it is kind of nerve-wracking streaming a defense up against Justin Herbert, who I know, when is clicking on all cylinders, could easily just eviscerate the Bengals defense. But the Broncos defense, who, in my opinion, doesn't look as good as they looked earlier on in the season, had 3 sacks up against the Chargers, 2 INTs, 1 touchdown, and 13 points allowed. So I'm pretty sure that I do believe that the Cincinnati Bengals are going to be able to get it done up against the LA Chargers. Again, not an upper echelon streaming option, but if you are looking into the deep depths of your league to go ahead and pick up a defense, I think that the Cincinnati Bengals will be able to get it done. Again, they're only being rostered in 7% of leagues, so it is very likely that you'll be able to go ahead and pick up the Bengals defense right now. But thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you did end up enjoying, again, please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below, as well as hitting that like button. I would appreciate it a ton. I love you guys all so much. I hope you have a great rest of your guys' day, and as always, guys, goodbye.